manager of Word in Greenpoint before I left to become a librarian. Does that make me look a little more familiar? I cut my hair and now nobody in publishing recognizes me anymore. But the reason I mentioned that is because transitioning 2 years ago from independent bookselling to librarianship has showed me a lot of things that I think publishers could be doing a lot better in the field of libraries, and I think Edelweiss sort of encapsulates a lot of them. The best way I could sum this up is probably with a question I got a lot, and still get, not as much, from people I knew in publishing, especially in the couple months after I left for Darien, which people would email me and be like, hey, do you know any librarians? We're trying to get in on the library market. Do you know anybody? Like, could you make friends? As though there weren't like there are literally 17,000 public library buildings in this country. And publishers were coming to me. I'd been a librarian for like 4 months, being like, do you think maybe you could take me out to coffee with a couple librarians? And I think what I've seen in the last 2 years is a lot of publishers sort of starting to realize that there's a real power, especially in the public library recommendation, where previously there was not a lot of respect amongst a lot of publishers for libraries because people just saw them as lost sales, that every book circulation was a book they didn't sell. And I do think a lot of publishers still secretly believe that, but it's been counterbalanced by the fact that with fewer physical bookstores, libraries are now one of the most reliable places for an American to actually see a physical book. And so in the last 2 years, I've seen, and I say that with a lot of love because I used to manage a bookstore. So I'm not saying I think bookstores are going anywhere, but I think all of a sudden publishers were like, oh, we should pay attention to the public library market in a way they haven't before. One of the number one ways I've seen them doing this is through Edelweiss, because as I mentioned, there are a lot of public libraries and a lot of public librarians in the country, and so it wasn't feasible to just add all of them to your galley lists, for example, or start sending boxes full of things, or even bookmarks to all the public librarians, even the influential ones, or whatever it is. And so I think a lot of them have started using Edelweiss because a lot of librarians were on Edelweiss already, because before publishers started paying more attention to libraries and library conferences, a lot of librarians, as bloggers, had gone on to Edelweiss to start requesting review copies. So it was already something that a lot of librarians, especially those who are interested in reader's advisory, had done. So that's sort of like the background of why I think this is something that's really important for publishers to be paying attention to, but especially smaller publishers, because I think one of the benefits of Edelweiss for librarians and publishers is that librarians are sort of just looking at it more broadly. They don't have the connections to, say, the big 5 publishers or even the larger independents that bookstores do, because we don't have our own individual sales reps, we don't have people coming around and asking our opinion for everything, so Edelweiss has sort of leveled the playing field on both sides. So let me tell you 3 specific things that I think librarians use Edelweiss for. And I think they're going to overlap a little bit with Rebecca's, so I'll try and keep the last 2 short. But the one that I know only librarians are using it for is a program called Library Reads. Has anybody here ever heard of Library Reads? Thank you. I'm glad to tell you because I'm on the steering committee. And hold on, I have to straighten up. This is quite uncomfortable. I'm really tall, so these things never...
You can lift it.
There we go. I can look, okay. Is this better? Okay. So Library Reads, okay, who here knows what the Indie Next List is? Okay, phew. So Library Reads came out of a conversation between Nora Rawlinson, who runs a great sort of early awareness thing for librarians called Early Word, and a lot of readers advisory focused librarians who were like, why don't librarians have an Indie Next List? Like, everybody knows public librarians are capable of making books and selling books. Why don't we have a list? And then they were like, oh, well, maybe we should make that list. And so that list turned out to be Library Reads, and this was just launched in September, so you don't need to feel terrible about not knowing about it yet. In another year, you should feel pretty bad if you don't know what it is. But the first list came out in September, and it works very similarly to the Indie Next List, where people submit about 2 months ahead of time, pre-pub, they read pre-pub, and then they submit. So right now, we just are collecting for our June list, was due on May 1st. They submit blurbs, they vote for books, we take the 10 books that get the most votes, they go on a list, libraries display that list, they buy extra copies of the book, etc., etc. Very similar to the Indie Next List. So this has been working really well for us, and we've seen an increase in submissions every month. We're getting a very, very diverse list. a fair amount of genre fiction and nonfiction, which is much less likely to be making an appearance on the Indie Next list. And one of the things we were worried about is that we'd end up with exactly the same list. So we've been really pleased to see that it's just a different set of books that are equally interesting. And this is a place where I think a lot of the publishers that work with Consortium could be really taking advantage of this to get more publicity for books that they can't get publicity for otherwise. And the reason is this. Because, as I said, librarians tend not to think on a publisher basis, because that's not how we buy books, they're searching Edelweiss very, very differently. So while Rebecca and Gavin are going to tell you sort of about the catalog view and like going through the fall catalogs and so on, which I used to do when I worked for Word, librarians are much more likely to be like, show me all literary fiction set in America that's coming out in July. I want to see that list, which is a very easy search to run in Edelweiss. Like, I need to figure out what I'm going to nominate for the August list, and I really like science fiction, so show me all science fiction published in August. And again, this is pretty publisher agnostic. It's just looking for those books, and then they're going through and saying, okay, these are the 4 I'm going to read, or this is the one I'm going to review copy for, or whatever. So I think that's a really great opportunity for small publishers to get their books noticed by librarians. If the information is up there and the review copy is up there, you're going to make, in a reasonable amount of time, you're going to make it very easy for librarians to discover your book. And because this is a relatively new list, and the secret of all these kinds of submission lists is not nearly as many people submit as you would like, you don't need, like, in the same way that you would need to sell thousands of copies of a book to get it on the New York Times bestseller list, all you need is a couple dozen really motivated librarians to get on this list. And that's a list that's not only patron-facing, so for example, in my library, we print this list, we give it to patrons, we make a display with the books, etc. But it's also very important to librarians who do collection development. A lot of them go back and look at it and be like, oh, I missed that one, because they're basically peer-reviewed. There's a blurb written by someone who's your colleague, probably on the other side of the country, recommending this book to you, so it's much more likely to be ordered. Baker and Taylor makes a cart with these books. I think I'm trying to think who else does. Maybe Audible makes a list. It goes in book page. So it's getting more and more marketing reach. We've noticed a couple books that made the bestseller, or made the Indie Next list. No, the Library Reads list, but also the Indie Next list. It gets mentioned in the New York Times advertisement. So people are starting to use it to promote books a little further. So it's the library staff picks list. And I think that, for me, if I were a publisher, would be the #1 reason to be using Edelweiss wisely. Making sure that the cover is up to date and attractive, making sure that the pub date is correct, making sure that the right subjects are on it so that when librarians are searching by subject, they're finding your book, if that's what they're interested in. And then looking at who puts it on their anticipating shelf or who puts it on their recommend shelf, and using that to make connections with these librarians. So it's Library Reads. I'm just going to keep saying Library Reads over and over again so all of you remember it. I even have some buttons if you want one. You can take a button home with you. But it's still on the ground floor. So in many ways, it's a good opportunity if you're looking just to reach out to librarians a little more and get them to know who you are and what your books are. That's a really good way to do it. The other thing I would recommend you do is use actually helpful comp titles in Edelweiss. Is something that I know librarians keep a really close eye on. If anything has ever been on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 10 weeks, it ceases to be a helpful comp title. So keep in mind, too, that librarians are much more backlist friendly because we don't lose anything by keeping the books aside from shelf space. We still do a lot of weeding, but librarians are much more backlist focused because we have these books on our shelves. So you can reach a little further, dig a little deeper for a comp title, rather than just saying, oh, it's a lot like Dan Brown. Well, fabulous, but that's not really going to make me want to read a book one way or the other. So between a good cover, solid metadata behind it in terms of subject and comp titles, I think that would be a really great way for you to get these books in front of this set of librarians. The other two things that I'll say very briefly, because I think they'll come up again with Rebecca, are the main things I and other librarians are using it for are, I get a daily notification email with the sort of social piece that Edelweiss has built in, showing me what my friends, who are booksellers and librarians and publishing people, have marked that they're anticipating, reviewed, recommended, not recommended, whatever it is. And I read that email every morning because it takes me like 10 seconds, and I feel like it's just a nice little hit of like, what's going on in the publishing world, especially for publishers and booksellers. They're looking much further afar than I am. So just to know that, like, oh, my friend said she's anticipating this book, or like I can always tell when my friend Susanna Hermans, who's the manager of Oblong Books, has had a sales appointment with a particular publisher because there will be like 20 books anticipated from Macmillan, which is what happened this week. So it's just getting those titles in front of my eyes over and over again and sort of helping me keep track of what's out there in the world. Again, your books have to be in there and they have to be up to date in order for that notification email to work, because the email just shows up and shows the cover, the title, and then what my friend did with it. And if the cover is missing or something's not up to date, it's not as useful. So the same thing. And the other thing about that is I'm looking for the big titles because I feel like booksellers are a little far ahead of me in terms of knowing like what the really, really big titles are going to be, or when a A-list author releases a book. But I'm also looking for things I haven't heard of yet. It's just as important to me as a librarian as it was as a bookseller to know about books before my patrons do. And to be able to talk about them and give that kind of reader's advisory for books that aren't out yet. So when I see a title show up twice that I haven't heard of yet, oh, now I'm intrigued. Or when I see an author I haven't heard of or a press I haven't heard of, seeing it in that email for me is so much different than seeing it in like Shelf Awareness or PW or something like that, because I know somebody in my life was interested in it, and that sort of sells it for me in a way nothing else can. But again, it's really important that the records are up to date for that to work. And then the last thing is ARCs. I believe it costs you money to put ARCs on Edelweiss, is that true?
It's very inexpensive.
It's very inexpensive, but it's money nonetheless. I work on the municipal budget now, so I very much understand what that's like. But I will tell you, it is basically the only place I look for ARCs, and it is the only place my staff looks, because there are other places to get them. But who wants to go looking 5 places for an ARC? Nobody. And since a lot of people were using it already before it became more open to librarians, they're kind of in there already. We're looking at it already for all of these other things. I think it's really, really worth considering, because a lot of times if a book looks interesting to me, I just download it and I put it on my reader. It's always with me all the time. If you're kind of on the fence about it, I will tell you that almost every librarian I know who uses Edelweiss, they use it pretty much exclusively to get their hands on review copies, in addition to keeping up to date. We don't really place orders through it the way that booksellers do, so it's much more of a publicity tool for us. It's not an everyday work tool. It's much more about knowing what's out there in the world and being informed. And being able to look at a review copy is a super, super important part of that. So library reads, library reads, library reads, library reads, the daily notification email, and the ARCs. If you're wondering what a librarian is doing with Edelweiss and why you'd want to make sure you were up to date with it, those would be the 3 reasons.
Great. I don't know which microphone to be. Yeah. Hello, I'm Rebecca with Greenlight Bookstore, and I'm the buyer for the bookstore, so I spent a lot of time on Edelweiss, and I think I went a little more nuts and bolts than Stephanie might have. Edelweiss is a very powerful tool and resource for us. It's also the devil we know. I will be the first to confess that I am not a fan of it. We all miss catalogs, but this is the inevitability. Why not embrace it and make it as good a tool as it possibly can be? Because it is what almost all buyers use nowadays. So it's better to make it really good. More often than not, buyers are looking at sales calls with 900 titles. And that's a lot of titles to look at. And when there's not good content there, your title becomes invisible. Edelweiss is a great tool, but it is also a great homogenizer of books. All books look the same unless you make them look different, unless you put cover images in there, unless you put good content in there, good comps. Comps are so valuable. They save so much time. Those are the only ways that you can make your book stand out. You know, we're fortunate because we're based in New York that we see sales reps. There are bookstores all over the country who are too small to have a sales rep in front of them, and they might be looking through this on their own. They might not have professional guidance, and if you don't help them find your book is lost in the shuffle, and all the good work and good effort you've done is lost in the shuffle, and you don't want that to happen, because we all care about our books. The downsides of Edelweiss, negative before positive. The homogenization potential. For me personally, it's sad that I'm now tied to a desk to do my preparation. I can't do it on the subway. I can't take the catalog to bed as easily unless I want to sit in bed with an iPad. It takes longer for me to prepare an order. You know, I have to, the Edelweiss changes the order prep to a front end kind of work. It used to be that it would be faster to prepare an order through a catalog, but then data entering would take a very, very long time. So from a bookseller's perspective, we save so much time and payroll hours using Edelweiss to prep orders, because as soon as we are done with it and it's put to bed. We're not handing that catalog off to be data entered. The advantage of downloading it straight into our order system is also that if you update your information, put the current, you know, the changes to the on sale date, or if you have a title change or you know, a price change, it downloads to our database the absolute current information. So it's more real time than it would be otherwise. So that's one of the upsides of Edelweiss, is that if you keep your data current, our data is more current. Data entering, it's easier for our staff to look through catalogs. You know, it used to be that one catalog would come to a bookstore, and it would, if it's a smart bookstore, they would be passing the catalog around, and by the time the buy is made, that all these pages folded down with what various people on staff liked or didn't like or whatever. Now it's easier for a bookseller to go in from wherever, and there's a tag function, and so we use that to annotate a lot of things for lists and things that we want to refer back to, our holiday feature titles. It's a very good organizational tool for us. I lost my train of thought. The important things that publishers, that are helpful when publishers do: cover images, accurate data, the on sale date, the trim size is weirdly important, for more so for some buyers than others. I used to be a sales rep and selling to Robert at Postman. If he didn't know what the trim size was of a paperback, if he couldn't risk it, because if it didn't fit on his front tables, and you've probably all been in Grand Central, you've possibly all been in Postman, and the front tables there are so high volume, so you don't put the trim size in there, and he doesn't know what the trim size is, whether it's a good or bad book, he might not buy it, because it won't fit where he would have placement. Trim size is weirdly important. Format, price point, catalog copy, not a wall of text that you can't even penetrate, and not just blurbs from other authors, content about the book that you would put on a catalog page, but a wall of text is almost as bad as nothing at all. Appropriate and useful comp titles are a major time saver in Edelweiss. Like I said before, Edelweiss, it takes longer to prepare an order in Edelweiss than it does through a catalog. The one way that publishers can help buyers save time is by using appropriate and useful and applicable comp titles. That's just my big plea, because it takes so long. Author tour info is sometimes helpful. Top tier publicity info is sometimes helpful. Timely and current information. Images, if you have an illustrated book and you're able to load a couple of spreads, these days you can save your money on a blad if you have the images in there. And galleys. One of the things that we did, not this past holiday season, but 2 seasons ago, and I know not all stores are there with this yet, but instead of giving our staff a holiday money bonus, we bought them all e-readers. And we said, here's your login to Edelweiss, and here's how you download galleys. And they use it. And the same with, she was saying that she reads a lot on e-readers now. I read probably 90% of my books electronically for galleys. It's a valuable thing. I wouldn't put galleys of every single title up there, but I would pick your shots and put the right ones up there, because they do get looked at. The value of reps too is, you put all your content in there, and then the rep makes it applicable to their territory, and giving them enough lead time to prep their catalog for their market so that it's got regionality is really valuable. If I don't have time to, if the rep doesn't have time to annotate their catalog in time for me to preview the catalog, the whole system breaks down. So having everything in there in a timely basis is really important. And I think that's my mission. Oh, this you do this. Oh yeah.
Okay. Come on, everybody. Come on, everybody knows we all judge books by their covers. So, the cover's up there. You heard it from her. I've used Edelweiss, so I'm going to give a short spiel on using it as a publisher. Who here has used it? Awesome. Who here has posted galleys on it? Who here publishes kids' books? And I include YA in that, anything that's not adult. Okay. And there's a question I want to ask, which is kind of impossible, because I want to know, do the kids' book publishers feel it's better for them than the adult book publishers? Because that's the response I got. I asked online. You may have seen it yesterday on the distributee list. And I asked, I got a couple of responses, including John at Cinco Puntos. And between his data and my data, something they had posted 7 books, I had posted 2 books, and we got 100 responses. And it broke down to the kids' books get a lot of responses. The adult books, not so much. And the readers came down to quite a surprising amount of people you would know, are using it. There were reviewers and bloggers that I actually know personally downloading our books, which was pretty funny to see. And it's like, okay, great, I don't need to send Ron Hogan a galley because he is downloading it off of Edelweiss. And for John and the other people who responded were not entirely sure that they had seen that they could link books posted to reviews. I could link to a couple of online reviews. One was great. It was a School Library Journal online for an adult short story collection. Who would have thunk it? I would never have sent it to them. They would never get galley, so that's great. And then kind of lower level reviews.
What do you mean by that link? Like when you said
I put the galley online. I could see that, Dave at School Library Review, School Library Journal, downloaded it and also marked it highly recommended on his when you download the activity thing. And then at some point a review popped up from him on the School Library Journal blog. So that was kind of that he downloaded that book, he reviewed it. And for the kids' book that we posted, I could see a lot more small reviews from bloggers and things like that. There wasn't anything else that was kind of high level. But the thing I do like about it is that I can now send it, so all the bloggers that reach out to us and say, put me on your galley list, who disappear, within 18 months, 2 years, you go back, their website is just gone. They stopped paying the hosting fees. I don't want to deal with them after a while. And yet, if I say that to someone who is a book blogger, I will have my guts for garters by the end of lunch. So I probably shouldn't have said that. Don't tweet it. Tweet it myself. So you can. About a third of the downloads were bloggers who are saving all of us a lot of time by going through Edelweiss and getting it. And I do not care if I am paying 12 cents or 22 cents for them to download the Kindle edition, or if it's free if they download the EPUB edition. I do not care. I'm very happy to not have them emailing me or to be able to point them towards that. And cost-wise, it costs $30 to upload your book.
We're just printing a whole bunch of galleries. Right.
Yeah, it is nominal. So my overall take on it from me and the other people that responded was it's very much worth it, but we're very much beginning we have more questions than answers at the moment. and some of the stuff you talk about is going to be impossible for us. Making personal, make friends, you know, with people. We're not going to have time for that. But but like
Most guys have friends anyway.
make friends with 200 librarians. Oh!
But I don't think it's important for you to have friends. It's just important for you to know that my friends are going to like your books, and then that will mean more to me than anything else you could do.
And the social thing that you talked about was what I actually miss about Goodreads. When Amazon bought Goodreads, I deleted my account and I missed it. You know, I had hundreds of friends, some of whom I actually knew, and I loved getting that email that said, you know, Stephanie's reading this, Rebecca's reading that, Jennifer's reading that. I loved that, and there were books that I had triangulated and got from that. So I missed that. So if there's something like that that's more industry focused, I want in on that side of it. So I'm going to talk to Edelweiss and say, how do I do this? So that would be useful for all of us. That was the quick and unlearned. So you know, we got a decent amount of response, but mostly from kids' books. And to reach out to the adult book readers, buyers, I think that is harder because they are flooded. You know, and the thing about I would be very curious to see if library reads remains very different from the Indie Next list, because the Indie Next list is funded by the big 5 publishers by their co-op budgets. So that list is pretty homogeneous to what they want, you know, their front list titles. If the library reads list remains different from that for the next couple of years, that would be awesome, you know.
Well, I think what you have on your side for that, can everybody hear me? Okay, I'll just be louder. What I think you have on your side for that is that librarians are naturally extremely distrustful of large corporations to an absurd degree for privacy reasons, for all sorts of reasons. And so, although actually Library Reads is also funded by co-op donations, which is a very, very new idea, we don't require it, and we've actually had a number of publishers not pay it, which is fine. But you will have librarians not reading things simply because they were corporately published, or there are many librarians who do not have, who just do not want to work with large publishers. For better or for worse, that's just the state of the profession right now. And then there are just as many who do, but I think librarians look at books very differently because of what they do, and they feel a different set of obligations to books. So I think that's something. There's also a much wider acceptance of genre fiction in the library world, which has been a huge difference in terms of what the submissions we get and what people are putting on that list. And again, you don't have the sales rep space reaching out and saying, oh, this is our lead title. Like, most librarians have never heard the words lead title before in their lives. They don't know what it means.
Librarians don't get books presented to them the same way booksellers.
And they probably wouldn't
react to them.
Right, they probably wouldn't care. The only reason it's important for me to know what the lead title is because I can assume my patrons are going to put it on hold because they're going to see it on the Today Show or whatever, and librarians aren't going to need 20 copies of it to put in the window.
What I remember from when I repped to Brodart was that demand was a big word. We have demand for this title, so I'm reacting to this title. It's not a pro-act market, it's a react market.
Mm-hmm. Which I think some librarians are trying to be a little more ahead of certain things, but frankly, we reserve a huge chunk of our budgets to wait and see what people ask for, because that's a big part of our obligation to the public, is to buy what people have specifically requested. So we can't do as much guessing without running out of money.
That's public libraries. Right?
Public libraries, yeah. Academic libraries we might as well be talking about a different profession in terms of book buying, yeah.
And school libraries.
School librarians are different too.
Right.
Yep.
I was just wondering what happens when Amazon buys Edelweiss. I give up.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Never say never.
Do you actually read each gallery, or you just
No.
get the copy? Is it?
I either read or skim catalog content,
Okay.
and then if there are books that I'm interested in reading, I will flag it to download.
So you're essentially reading it as if it were a catalog.
Yeah, it is a catalog. It's just on the computer. Yeah, but it's an electronic catalog.
But it has galleys on it.
But if I do, I don't look at it anymore because I don't need to. I get that, because it's such a time saver on data entering, even if I still have the option of a printed catalog, I use Edelweiss even though I prefer physical catalogs. It's the more practical tool for today's reality. I don't have the time anymore to spend 3 hours paying my bookseller to data enter when there's a million other things to do.
Right.
And
then from the library perspective, I'll say that we never got catalogs. So the way librarians are finding out about books when they're not finding out about them through Edelweiss is reviews. So PW, LJ, whatever. And I all know how much you guys just love waiting to see how a review turns out to see if it sells your book. And for most librarians at this point, Baker and Taylor is we do 90% of our ordering through Baker and Taylor because they process their books for us. If there's anything more homogeneous than an Edelweiss catalog listing, it's what a book looks like in Baker and Taylor, which is another place where everyone should be putting their information in more readily. But I think I discover books on Edelweiss, whereas in Baker and Taylor, we're mostly working with carts they've put together from review sources, and if I'm going to find something and really look and search, it's going to be an Edelweiss.
Can it make one point about librarians? Libraries buy non-returnable.
Yes, we do.
It's a very important part.
Yeah.
And yet, it's amazing how many library books end up in your herbs.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
How does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
So the covers and metadata comes off our distributor's website. We upload it to them, it goes out. And then there is stuff on Edelweiss that we can update ourselves, like the comp copy stuff. I know that you can add more of them. The interior art. So that would be something that we could all focus on. The basic stuff, we're trying, we want it to be as simple as possible. We upload it once, and then it goes out into the world.
Even so if keeping things updated is a challenge, even if you just have covers and catalog copy, worst case we can look, we can do our own homework for comp titles. Worst case, we find out that the on-sale date has changed. But covers are so valuable. If there is no cover, your book is invisible. It looks like nothing in the 900 title catalog that we look at.
So I was looking at it yesterday. I was looking at that email that came in, and I clicked through, and I was looking at lists of fiction that is coming out this month, and it did seem like there was just tons of dreck. Do you find yourself? How do you find
We
your?
read through a lot of stuff to find our books.
Okay.
Yeah.
How could be?
It's not glamorous.
So can you go and find the consortium catalog, or is it the Perseus catalog, or?
Yeah. There's catalogs that I tend to rely on my sales reps. As a former sales rep, I kind of I'm weirdly principled about it. I believe that I should use my sales reps as much as I possibly can, because if we don't use them and meet with them, then they go away. And then we all complain about the where did our sales reps go, yet if we weren't meeting with them, then we're part of the problem. But anyway, my sales rep is Dan Fallon, he's wonderful. And so I will have him, I will use the link that he provides me, because that's him doing his part of the job, of providing me the catalog. Even though I could go in and pull it myself. That way I know that I'm looking at the exact right catalog that he's going to be meeting with me about. I'm a forgetful person these days. In 1 second, I'm a forgetful person these days, and I lose track with all of the different ways that different publishing houses are. Like, I just bought Summer from Simon & Schuster, and I'm buying books that go on sale in January from Random House. I don't know if I'm buying spring, summer, or fall. I rely on my sales reps to tell me that, so I don't want to prep the wrong catalog. But I'm sorry.
One thing that I'm really curious about is the other direction, like titles that have been around a little bit and sales reps have already moved well beyond. Everyone's talking like, get this up early, but we have, like, for example, we're a really new publisher. Our sales reps do the best by us that they can, but no one really knows us, so some of our titles have surprised us with how they've done. What do you do? Is there a way you can use Edelweiss for titles that maybe came in the late fall catalog but now are sort of irrelevant for a lot of stuff, but we are getting movement on these titles? Like,
You can do solicitation. You can create.
Or is this something you look at?
Yeah, I mean, you meaning the publisher or the sales rep can create like a resolicitation catalog, or like there's a drop-in catalog, or the collections, I guess they're called. I get all my words mixed up, but but, you know, something that, you know, I have some reps who will build a collection and say, these are titles that you want, that you may have missed, that you now is closer to the on sale, that you want to go back and revisit, you know.
This catalog is Edelweiss, this consortium has catalog circulars.
And you can resend an individual page or title.
Or create a collection of a group of titles to send that from books that are articles.
Is that something that a publisher could do? Like he could do that, or?
You can hold your own list. As a user, you can create a collection of books.
Okay.
I will say that as a frontless buyer with a busy store to run, I rarely have time to go back unless somebody asks me to go back. So we rely on good sales reps to say you should revisit this. Here's a link to books you should revisit. You know, and if I don't have somebody putting that in front of me, I move forward. You know, and I hate to say that, but it's just the reality of busy times.
Any more questions?
You know, it would be helpful from a consortium standpoint to clarify to us what you do and what we do. Because I feel like that's
Yes.
not particularly transparent. And for me to go back to my office and staff and who are not convinced that Edelweiss is important, which no matter how much, I mean, you know, so part of why you're having this panel is to convince us all, and, you know, I already know. But, well, I mean,
I think she's
work at
pretty
City Lights.
convincing.
Well, I work at City Lights, I see, you know, we have one buyer there, Paul, who everybody knows, who like hates Edelweiss intensely and tries not to use it at any, you know, but still has to.
Give them a mark.
The ugly but good thing that the big publishers did was force buyers to use Edelweiss.
Yeah, exactly.
And once that happened, there's been a sea change with, I mean, Bob at St. Mark's uses it. I mean, you know, like Chris at Corner uses it. I mean, like when I was a sales rep, I couldn't even picture Chris sitting at a computer like that. But it's the devil we know now. We have to use it. If you don't load your books and your content and your information into Edelweiss in a useful, productive way, I don't see your book.
No, and so given that,
Yeah.
I don't feel like.
So you're not really going onto Edelweiss directly as a publisher unless you're using the digital review copy function. In terms of what they're looking at, that information is through Helix. I mean, what you're using to load the information that they are looking at on